Well, hello and welcome to tonight's webinar. Today is Wednesday, the 3rd of November, and we have with us this evening our wonderful founder, Ian Clifford. We also have our technical expert, Andy Donald, with us, and myself here to join you. And we also have a guest with us, a guest panelist. His name is Kevin Stanford. Unfortunately, Kevin has had a lot of difficulties logging on laptops and on iPhones to try and get here. So he is here, but he's only in audio. So if you hear some loud booming voice that comes through from nowhere, you'll know it's our guest, Kevin. Would you like to say hello, guys? Ian?
Yes, good evening, everybody. We've got a very interesting webinar tonight. Massive interest, so hopefully we can live up to expectations. And welcome to Kevin.
Hello, hello guys. I'm really sorry about not being able to see me tonight, especially as it looks so nice.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Well, we're glad you're here. We're glad you made it, even if it is only audio. And Andy, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. I wish I could see you all. I can't, but I hope you're all doing really well in this coldish spell over here. Bit grey and cold, but yeah, I hope you're all well.
Good. Well, as I said, tonight's webinar is a new webinar that we've brought together and prepared for all our clients who are eagerly awaiting new freedom solutions that we're bringing online month by month. Tonight, we are going to be specifically talking around our private bespoke law process and why private law is the best remedy for us as free sovereign people going forwards. And we're going to draw some really important points out of tonight's session. So I hope you can stick with us. We've been inundated with questions already, and I'm going to try and panel it. I'm going to try and bring all those questions in. If your question doesn't get answered, we will get round to coming back to you. We've got a list of all the questions and who's asked them, and we've got a team behind us who will be phoning and contacting each individual where we weren't able to answer your questions. Please bear with us. This is the first of these types of webinars, specifically around our bespoke product. We've never done this webinar before, so we're hoping to cover off quite a lot, as you can see from the content slide on the first page here. There's quite a lot to get through, so we hope we'll keep it interesting for you. Don't forget to make use of the chat to ask your questions, and we'll pick them up as we go along. So, are we ready to start, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Well, would you like to lead us in, Ian, on this first initial slides? Give everybody an understanding of what this is about.
Yeah, so what this slide is going to show us, it's actually two slides. It's a very typical story, and it's a story that I lived through, and I think you may hear something similar from Kevin. I'm not John Smith, obviously, but I was registered, like all of us, via the birth certificate, and unbeknown to me and unbeknown to John Smith on this slide, that created a legal fiction, a person or a citizen of the state. Now, that doesn't sound so bad, does it? But there are some consequences that we weren't aware of. John, in this example, is the real living man, and John has inalienable rights as a living man. But John Smith, or Mr. John Smith, is this fictional person, a citizen, and he doesn't really realise that that doesn't give him very many rights. And we'll see why that's relevant as we go through this evening's webinar. Now, poor old John has something happened that caused him damage, and John, or Mr. John Smith, like most of us, would think, oh, that's something that I really need to do something about. So what does he do? He goes to his lawyer, and he's using his name, John Smith. And the lawyer agrees to represent him. So there's nothing unusual about that story. And probably most people would say, well, what are you talking about here? Why is this relevant? Well, if we flip over to the next slide, we'll begin to realize why it's relevant. The first thing is that the lawyer doesn't tell John that his first duty is to the court, and it's not to John. So big realization, lawyers don't work for their clients. Lawyers actually swear an oath to the court, and they work for the court as officers of the court. So that's something which a lot of people aren't aware of. What John's lawyer doesn't tell him as well is that the whole legal system is based on making money. It's all about commerce. It's not really about justice, although they present it like it's some sort of remedy for justice. In reality, it's not really about that. It's really about making money. And poor John Smith doesn't realize that when he walks into the lawyer's office. Now, of course, when you hire a lawyer and you go on the attack, then the other side, the alleged wrongdoer, what does he do? Well, he hires his own lawyer. And now you've got two lawyers who are going to have a bit of a battle with each other. So what do? Well, the first thing they do, and it's nearly in every single case I've ever seen, including my own, is they create controversy. So they've got to stir up the emotions. They've got to whip up the, the emotions and get the fight going. It's a bit like for those of us who went to comprehensive school, two kids have a bit of an argument, and they'd have a bust up at the end of the day, and they'd have a ring of kids round, to whip it all up and make it much more of a drama than it really is. And that's what's going on with lawyers. They deliberately make controversy, and that enables them to send missiles to each other with all sorts of allegations and all kinds of aggressive and threats and all kinds of stuff. And of course, both sides, the clients on both sides, think, well, that's normal, so we just have to go along with that. But whilst all that's going on, the bill is going up and up and up and up on both sides. And that, of course, is the lawyer's dream, because they want these things to go on for a long time. And still, neither side is actually getting anywhere near any justice. They're just racking up loads of bills, because that's basically what the legal system is really all about on the civil side. Now, the case goes to court, and unfortunately, John's lawyer didn't play a very good game, because, or John Smith's lawyer, he wasn't as skilled at the game of the legal system as the other side's lawyer. So he loses. So not only has he had damage caused to him, but his lawyer wasn't as good as the other guy's lawyer. So he loses the case, and he has to pay the wrongdoer's costs. And that quite often happens. And if anybody can tell me where the justice has gone in there, I'd like to see it, because I don't see any of it at all. That's the story.
I think that's really important, that you've drawn this out, because I think a lot of people on this webinar this evening will have experienced similar, or at least seen or observed similar. And so this will resonate with a lot of people. So it's good that we've set the scene. I think, what we're hoping to achieve this evening is drawing out how we can get around this. What is our remedy? If we can't go into the courts and play their game, what game do we play? What game can we participate in? So if we move to the next slide, thank you. Andy, would you like to give us a little bit about what this is?
Well, private law, I suppose, has been my main interest for over a decade now. So we've kind of made the acronym of law helpful here to kind of understand there's three jurisdictions in law. One pertains to the land, is the common law. One pertains to the air, which is equity, and one pertains to the water, which is admiralty, maritime. And we've been through this in some of our previous presentations, which people may or may not have seen. So, the law of the land, very solid, very firm, very kind of substantial. Okay, The law of equity is a higher form of law. It's above everything else, and it's fluid, and a bit like water. But it's not called the law of equity so much. It's just really equity. It's a principles of equity. It's like the spirit of the law. Again, spirit. You've got this kind of essence of air and spirit, this kind of idea. And then you've got the law of the water, which is the Admiralty Maritime. And we know that whenever you see bills of exchange, negotiable instruments, banking, insurance, any of this sort of stuff, that's all that side of things. So you've got these three things, and they obviously all meet together at various nexuses within the world that we experience within our commercial lives. But commerce pervades all of these things. So private law really, we're going to, I think, get into a little bit more detail about this later on, but private law is really based on the principles, because you've had essentially, whether it's the land, air, or water, whatever law form you're in, you've got some fundamental axioms, principles, maxims, as they're actually usually called in law, and then everything is built by reason or expounded on upon those things. And so you get a kind of very complicated edifice. But if you just go back to first principles, then it's actually quite easy for anyone to understand what the law is, which is why ignorance of the law is no excuse, because you don't have to read all the statutes, you don't have to read all the codes and regulations and this and that. If you understand the principles, then you will be able to understand the law, and anyone can go and find these things online. So I've already mentioned that equity is really the highest realm of law, so we tend to start from those principles. They're our ultimate guides in what we're doing. But what we're really doing is we are establishing facts, because the first thing that happens is that the law only applies to the facts. So until the facts are established, then it's talking about law is kind of irrelevant. So in private law, we always start with, and I'm sure some people are familiar with this already, we always start with facts established under oath, which is done by way of affidavit. But we then, instead of going to the courts because we can't solve our own problems between each other, or we don't know how to, rather, it's not anyone's fault that they can't. We know this method in the typical story presented by Ian at the beginning there, that you go and get a lawyer. That's what you do. But you don't need to. That's a third-party arbitrator, because you're unable to arbitrate between yourself and the other party. So what we do is we use an administrative private due process to agree wrongs and damage established in the facts that we swear to be true under oath. And this functions because this is the private realm. You'll notice in the public realm, everyone's operating under limited liability insurance. They're all operating under the protections of their limited liability insurance. Well, in the private world, if you waive that protection and you're operating in unlimited liability, well, whoever's taking the maximum risk is given the maximum credit, okay? Because they're risking everything. It's again, I think the tale of from Solomon deciding between which of the two women when they're arguing over whose child it was. And when he says, well, we'll cut it in half, and one of the women goes, no, she can have it, and he goes, right, you're obviously the mother because you're the one who cares about the child the most. So this kind of gets at the principle, it's whoever's taking the most risk, is willing to put up the most, is the one who's given the most credit. So when you wade into any dispute or kind of matter where you've been wronged, and you swear facts are under an unlimited liability oath, then you require whoever is responding to you to waive their limited liability and take a similar form of oath under penalty of perjury and unlimited liability, in order to the scales of justice must balance. That you can't have an unlimited liability oath and a limited liability oath. They don't balance out. So one is heavier than the other. So this is all in unlimited liability. In reality, in the private, that's what this world is. Lots of risk in the private. The real world has a lot of risk in it. In the public, everyone's insured. It's very risk-free. So wrongdoers, if they come back and lie under oath, particularly with unlimited liability, they risk some very serious penalties. They're criminal penalties as well. Obviously, it applies both ways. This is why this is for people who are truthful. If you have been wrong, you've got to better swear the truth under oath and not misuse these things. And you've got to be very careful with the language you use, because You take a very strong oath these things, so you have to be able to state plain facts, simply getting just to the heart of the matter, using very concise language, very specific language that's just gets the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as the phrase goes. So, okay, we understand we need to establish the facts. Shall we move on to the next slide?
Sure.
Okay, so this exposes the corporate system's Achilles heel by stripping away the corporate veil. Now, it may be that there is no corporate veil involved in whatever you're dealing with, but oftentimes there is, because you're going directly to the man or woman, the people who are personally did the wrong. You know, corporations can't do you a wrong directly. It's people, bad actors within those corporations that are actually doing the wrong things, and by those wrongs are causing people damage. So once you've established like who's doing the wrong, what damage was done, so then you just have to understand, well, exactly how did this come about. Oh, I think we've made a form on our website where people will be able to go and they'll be able to fill in this sort of information for their matters to be considered. Now, what we can then do is that we can follow a kind of due process, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail. Some of you, sure you already understand this. And we really want to novate the matter. So what happens when you go to court is essentially you're looking for some sort of compensation to put right what was done wrong. So again, we're not looking to do anything that the courts don't do themselves, but we're just looking to bypass them. If I swear the truth and you do not swear that I'm lying, and they won't, because it would be criminal to do so in almost all cases. Not to say that some people don't lie under oath, it's possible, but the danger of them getting found out for that and the potential consequences tend to mean that if you're telling the truth, people won't do that. And by following an administrative due process, you'll come to an agreement as that you're telling the truth, essentially. All right, and this is all done by essential commercial principles of contract. And again, referring back to the maxims, all these principles that we're using, and it's found in the maxims. And what we're then trying to do is really just novate the whole matter and say, well, here's what I estimate the value to be, and I want payment to put it right. Essentially, it can be that you might want some sort of performance to put it right. That's an equitable kind of way to solve things sometimes. However, in many situations, you know, that ship sailed, and it's like the only way you can really repair someone is to compensate them financially. So that novate the matter into a bill for damages, and then you can liquidate that bill for damages, because a bill is a form of financial instrument. If it's based on facts, then it's a reasonable instrument. It's a financial instrument. It's a security, and it can be liquidated into. So you would call that a form of asset money, money of account. But you can then, there's various ways and means of liquidating that into something what we normally understand in the modern world as liquid money that you can actually spend. But also the benefits of the private process are that you can use it not just to say pursue a wrong that has been done to you and cause you damage, but if people are like, if you're actively in a situation where you want to pursue a wrong, but what normally happens is people use the legal system in very conniving ways to kind of attack people and kind of kneecap them and take away their resources and stop them, tie them up in processes and stop them actually being able to assert their rights and assert their interests. Well, you can use these processes as well to untangle these webs, because a lot of it's based on lies. Once you shine the light of truth onto those lies, a lot of the problems can go away, which leaves you free of the burdens to then pursue what is right, to go and protect your interests and your rights. So you can gives you the ability to fend off commercial attacks while asserting your rights. So, like as I say, I don't think that was necessarily like it's more explaining what can be done with private law rather than what is it. But I think we're going to cover that a little bit more detail anyway in the next slide. So.
Yes, thank you for that, Andy. We've had a few questions come in, more around whether this process, what we're about to go into more detail on, is available to everyone around the world. Is it available in other countries? And also, is it applicable to certain circumstances or all circumstances? Ian, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, it's a very simple answer. The reality is that although it appears that we're living in a world full of different countries and different systems, in reality there's only one system, and the system is based on commerce and based on contract. So it doesn't really matter where you are. This system of private law is a remedy. I mean, there may be some very obscure areas of the world where it may not be as applicable, but I'd say the vast majority of the world, private law will be as effective as it is in the UK.
Great. And what about the application of it in certain circumstances? I know people have, put forward certain scenarios on their questions, relating to marriage, when there's a split, relating to business, relating to all kinds of different wrongdoings or issues that they've experienced in the legal realm, but also with individuals and organizations or companies. Is there anywhere that this cannot be used or applied to?
No, I mean, I like to keep things simple, and the way I look at this is if you had 1,000 people and you asked them all to give you their opinion on a particular issue that somebody suffered from, and the majority says, well, that thing that happened there and that person that seems to have been damaged there, that doesn't seem right to us. We're not lawyers, we don't want to be lawyers, but it doesn't seem right to us. That's pretty much what we're talking about, is equity. So if the majority have a belief that something is right or wrong, that's pretty much what equity is about, and that's what private law is really about. It's going with the majority.
Thank you, Ian. I think that's really important for us to answer those questions early on, because there's a number of people here on this webinar this evening who are from different parts of the world, and we want to keep you engaged. This is a process that is pretty much available, accessible to everybody. And I would just add on to that, Ian, that these are biblical principles, and you can't get rid of the Bible. Okay, you can't get rid of God's word, and that's why equity is higher. That's why it will always prevail, because it's about the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law, and that's in terms of substance, that's a much better grounding than the legal realm, the legality, which is all based on fiction. Okay, so we're going to move to our next slide. Thank you. Oh, hello, Kevin. We're going to introduce you on this slide. Kevin is, hello. I'm so sad that you can't make it here, that our audience can't see you this evening. But if they're following us, and if our audience have been, coming to our other webinars, coming to listening on other things, then they're going to get to know you, sure enough. So why don't you give us an introduction, Kevin, to who you are and how you got involved with natural justice, and what is what is private law doing for you at the moment?
Okay, thank you, Simone. Well, I co-founded Karen Millen, the fashion brand, which Karen and I sold in 2004 for £120 million. Then became the majority shareholder of All Saints and built a portfolio of assets worth over £500 million, which were held at Kelpting in Luxembourg. Kelpting collapsed in 2008. And in 2010, the Icelandic Truth Report revealed that Kelpting was one of the largest frauds in history, nearly twice the size of Enron. Along with so many others, Karen and I were victims of this fraud. I then wasted £8 million and 10 years of my life on litigation, quite stupidly believing in the integrity of the courts. I was made bankrupt, at which point the lawyers stopped answering their phones. I had been given data by the former management of Kelpting to prove the fraud, and I was defending a Norwich Pharmacal application from the bank's new owners to stop me using the data as evidence in court. I was out of cash and representing myself when I came across natural justice. They told me about private law. Natural justice showed me how to extinguish the Norwich Pharmacal order and also void my mortgage, which has enabled me to keep my family home. natural justice has showed me how to protect my assets from the trustees of my bankrupt estate, who were conspiring with the conspirators, the successors of Calthing, to collect the proceeds of fraud. Natural justice. Now, yeah, sure. Sorry.
May I interrupt? Sorry, Kevin. I just want to draw some more out of this. I'm sure our audience have some of these questions as well. So this all started happening and unfolding for you around 2008, between sort of 2008, 2010.
Yeah.
So am I right in saying that you were stuck within the legal realm, using lawyers all the way from 2008 to 2000?
And then I found that it misrepresented me in the settlement, and then it all got very legal. They claimed against me in the Luxembourg courts in 2011, and I've been fighting there and in the UK till I went bankrupt in 2019.
So am I right in saying that you've had a pretty experience of what Ian was talking about at the very beginning of our webinar, that you were that Mr. John Smith hiring that lawyer to represent you, and for all that time, 2008 to 2019, they did nothing but harm you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I completely believe in the justice system. I had no idea that the courts of corporations and they worked on Admiralty. I had no idea. I had no idea that the courts are in the City of London, which is not even part of the UK. This, obviously I paid lawyers a lot of money, and I obviously listened to them. You do, and it's only really when you run out of money that you really have the freedom in some ways to actually listen to other people, because there's no one else there to tell you that it's not true. So I was very, very lucky to meet Ian and Andy of Natural Justice and show me the light.
Brilliant. So you went through this awful experience over a period of 10 or so years. Now I'm just trying to paint a picture for the audience here that, are you able to share with us, you obviously spent a lot of money with all those lawyers, and over a 10-year period, and at the end of it, you had no remedy. Is that correct?
Well, the main issue you come across a lot of the time is time barring. By the time you prove, you have to prove the fraud, which is very, very difficult. I was lucky enough to be able to prove the fraud because the courts in Iceland imprisoned the senior management, and I was able to get a lot of the information from the courts, which is pretty unusual. It doesn't happen in the UK. But then you find you're up against six-year time barring, which it takes you that long really to be able to prove a fraud to the threshold they need, and then they say, "Well, sorry, it's time barred." I know now how it was, but I really believed in it, and I wouldn't give up because I couldn't deal with the injustice. And now I found that there can be justice in a very different way to what I expected.
So just comparing then your two experiences, 10 years with lawyers ending up bankrupt, with everything being taken from you, or about to be taken from you, compared to what, 6 months to 8 months or a year potentially with natural justice?
I feel totally, everything's been turned on its head in a good way. It's been quite an experience. I feel so empowered. I feel that there is justice in the world. We've just got to find it. You don't have to pay for it like we thought. And we're in a very good place, which I think I was basically up shit creek without a paddle before I met these guys. And I'm very.
Well, I don't think you're alone, Kevin. I personally, and I know Andy and Ian and the team, even, you know, in Matrix Freedom, who receive calls from our clients, there's a lot of people out there who have had a lot of wrongdoing happen to them, and they're not getting remedy and they're not getting justice because, as we know, the system is rigged. But it's such a joy to hear that we can use true law, true justice, and we can get remedy, we can get change, we can, you know, set precedents in private. So your experience at Natural Justice, that's how long have you been working with the Natural Justice team, Kevin?
I started working with them in August 2019, but we really started working together on the private law cases, I would say, in about January. And as I say,
2020.
it's like I needed a miracle and I got one. And it's all I can say. You know, I mean, I was going to lose my home. I was bankrupt. Luckily enough, my wife stuck with me, and we managed to have twins along the way. I don't quite know how it happened. We've got 3-year-old twins. Yeah, it's we feel in a very, very good place now. We feel very empowered against all the injustice that was done against us. You know, I don't want to get angry about all these people. I try and think of them as traffic wardens. And if you get angry with a traffic warden, there's something wrong with you, isn't there? I just feel that this way we can get even and I can move on. And
it kind of,
and maybe it weren't wasted. Maybe that was a journey to get where we got here.
absolutely, and we're glad that you've found a place here, because you're very much needed within this, and you're a real life example of how natural justice, private law, using this process can really turn around someone's outlook, someone's mental health, someone's family situation, and you know, you've still got a home, a roof over your head, you know, and that's important.
Yeah, you know, it's great to share this, and you know, I find it difficult talking because I think there's quite a few people out there, and I'm quite find it quite difficult. But I really want to share this, and show you know how grateful I am for where natural justice have put me, because no one else, everyone else wants to just suck you dry and spit you out.
And this goes back to something that Andy mentioned earlier, right? Andy said this is coming from the heart. This is about what is conscionable, what is unconscionable. You cannot expect to get remedy using private law if you're not coming at it with the right heart. You know, if you're coming at it from a place of greed, from an orphan spirit that is, you know, just looking for vengeance, even, then really this isn't really for you. You know, it's not going to give you the results that you need, because it is coming from a spiritual part of us, a spiritual fabric of what natural justice is. Yeah.
I always had a feeling that somewhere there must be justice, and you know, that someone guided the light to you guys. It's the more I think about it, the more it's how incredible it is. But
it took a little bit of time to switch the mindset a little bit, didn't it, Kev? It's
take a little
from that kind of where, because you've been through such an ordeal for so long, and it's hard sometimes. It took a little bit of time of actually kind of following the path that we set out a little bit before it started to kind of slot into place, and you see how you can kind of let go of a lot of the anger and frustration at what you've been through, and it becomes a much more peaceful thing to deal with all these problems, where you can actually not worry so much about them.
Yeah, do you remember it took me quite a long time because I was obsessed with proving things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this is one element of this is to remove the emotion, right? Equity is about maturing and being a mature individual, where you don't have to throw cuss words across the table at your enemy. You can come at it from a peaceful manner, knowing that you're standing in truth, that you're standing in justice, you know. So it is very, very different.
I think that emotion builds up because of the frustration of not getting anywhere through the conventional means. So you just get, you know, you get so frustrated about not actually getting what is right that that energy doesn't go anywhere. It's not getting discharged. It builds up in you, and it's quite hard to let go of sometimes. So yeah, like this method of dealing with things is just it's so positive. It's not just for you know, your benefit externally and materially, but also for your benefit internally, and actually for the benefit of society at large as well, because you're not causing the expense to the public as well, and it's actually better for the other side, believe it or not, as well. So
thank you, Andy. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide. Kevin, did you want to add anything more to that, or Ian, would you like to comment as well?
Oh, I'd just like to say that when Kevin came to see me earlier in the 2021, we sat down and swapped stories in a 10-hour session. But it hardly seemed, you know, we look like, you know, our backstories are similar in many ways, and that was quite a pivotal moment for both of us, I think, because it really spurred me on to get natural justice as a remedy. I already knew the darkness was out there because I'd experienced it myself. But you know, coming across someone like Kevin, whose story should be made into a movie, it really is that interesting, and it's, you know, and I think a lot of people would want to watch it. It's an extraordinary story if you get to know all the details. And that's really, you know, was one of the motivations for what we're doing today with natural justice, to bring this private law remedy to a much wider audience, because there's so many people out there who need this.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so shall we dive in, guys, into the meat of it? Are you ready? How about Andy? Why don't you take us away with the first couple of slides?
okay, so the difference between legal and lawful, they're often used interchangeably, but the law, as we talked about earlier, really stems from these maxims and principles that we're talking about. It's the substance of the true law in accordance with, you know, God, if you believe in such a thing, or in accordance with nature if you don't. These kind of overriding and eternal principles that are bigger than, you know, the minutiae of human societies, which are temporal, all these temporal things. So, you know, we often think of it as the law of the land, and it's those things that we're really in accord with ethics and the spirit and the substance of the law, as I said. The legal is a bit different. So it's really about pertaining to the understanding, exposition, administration, science and practice of the law. So it's kind of people putting law into practice, such as the legal profession and legal advice and those sorts of uses of the word. It's really implied or imputed in law. It's law expounded upon, and it's very technical generally. It looks more to the letter and the form of the law than to the substance and the spirit. The substance and the spirit is what matters. All these formalities, when you go into the court, you're not only dealing with all the, you know, the kind of weird codification, super complicated codifications of very simple legal principles, sorry, lawful principles. You see, even I can make this mistake. But you're also dealing with the court procedure rules. Well, that's a whole set of law in itself, just to doing things right within the court. Now, they're very difficult to understand, you know, that's where lawyers can use things like what's called sharp practice, whereby they'll use, you know, conniving little side attacks, like by using the rules to kind of try and derail you and cost you money. And if they can cost you enough money, maybe you can't go on, maybe you can't continue. Yeah, it's really, legal is more about the positive rules of law. So man, as a race, has taken law and then kind of reissued it almost, or restated it in a form which is much more beneficial for the commercial benefit of the elite and those who have had access to the specific training and expertise in those fields, which, you know, costs. My barrister's education was about £200,000 or something like that, you know, and he's only an expert in one area. So the amount of money you need to get this expertise, and it keeps this stratification of society. But you know, I think the analogy that I always use is is the ace in the pack. You know, you think you're at the bottom of the pack, but guess what? The ace is above the king. And if you just realize you go straight to the principles, you can fly to the top of the pack in an instant. 3 clicks of the heels and you're back in Kansas. So so that's the difference between legal and lawful, really. Why the law was corrupted? Well, obviously, there is the huge economic incentive for it to be so. Power corrupts, we know this. And so as soon as lawyers have a special status in society, they have special knowledge, which requires people to need them. They start clubbing together. You know, this is just the way that anything corrupts ever, you know. And also, you might say that because the legal world attracts people who are much more less of the heart and more of the intellect, you know, it can entice that fall into pride, which is the kind of cardinal sin, and then everything else kind of flows from there. That's just that is a law of nature, unfortunately, or a law of God. That's how things get corrupted. It's pride first, rebellion, and they want to use what was once good and turn it for their own benefit rather than for the benefit of others. It's selfishness against selflessness, as always. These are well-established things that we all understand from all of the mythos of that we pass down in whatever tradition we're in any part of the world, pretty much. So why the probability of getting justice in the legal system is about 50-50, irrespective of the merits? Well, because there's an imbalance of economic means for a start, because that you never know. That's because you have judges are given discretion again, which is another kind of power. Now, it's a power which was meant for good in equity, you know, the discretion to allow when the law wasn't being applied in a just way to interpret it, give some leniency and smooth the edges a bit. But these days, you know, the incentivization is to use discretion to benefit certain parties, particularly big corporate parties. I used to attend magistrates' courts against councils. And obviously, you know, the courts are part of the government and the councils are part of the government. So it's a conflict of interest here for a start. Okay. Now, nevertheless, we used to win a lot of cases that I would go in and represent as a layman representative for a charity. Now, occasionally we would lose a case and you'd have to go up to judicial review. And that was, and the wording that we would use in those situations was that, you know, that justice has to be done and be seen to be done. I'd say it's more a case of as long as justice is seen to be done, although it maybe had to be done, now it just has to be seen to be done. And if you but you cannot do justice, and then it's like, well, question of, do you have the means to go all the way up to judicial review and correct the decision of the lower courts? And the answer for almost any normal person is no. And if you have the money, yes, you can get justice. It does happen. But like we say in this slide, you know, for most people, particularly when they've suffered damage, most likely they've had their means to go and get their remedy depleted, and so, you know, it's going to be tough to get a proper justice within that system.
Absolutely. And you touched on, you know, previously about cost and how, you know, there's a massive difference between costs. You know, if we were going to, you know, I know it's really difficult because, you know, every case is weighed up on its own merits and depends what court you're going in at and what, you know, how long a case would take. But, you know, for private law, are there any costs associated with running your own process in the lawful realm?
Well, yes. I mean, there's obviously the cost of time. There's the cost of just general administrative work that needs to be done, but that's about it, you know. That can be minimized and quantified in a fairly finite set amount, you know, where it doesn't just escalate off and you don't actually know where the ceiling of the whole thing is. It's pretty finite. Obviously, the more complex the set of facts are, the more time needs to be spent kind of sifting through them and getting everything in order, because you have to start with very solid foundations of the truth, not just the truth, it's the substantive truth, the truth that actually matters. Because, and I know Kevin will probably be able to comment on this, when he first came to us earlier this year, his story was a 10-year epic, more than 10-year epic saga. It was literally like the siege of Troy, and every detail mattered. But also you have all that emotional attachment, and that's what makes every detail matter to you. when other people come to things and come to things cold and just and work kind of backwards, you know, what matters for what the result we want is, let's work back on what are the facts that really matter to establish these things. You find that a lot of the story really falls away, and not so much of it as you think is as important as you think. So so I think that's something that we've noticed, and I've forgotten what your point was leading me to that comment, but maybe you could pick up from it and bring me back on track.
Well, can I just interject there? I mean, the thing is, with the legal system, you're on the clock.
Yeah.
And you know, the clock just keeps going round and round.
Yeah.
And they like the clock to go round and round, because the more times it goes round and round, the more money they make.
Yeah.
This private law process is not like that. You know what the process is. We're going to get to that as we go through the next few slides. So you can quantify what the cost is before you start. That's the big difference.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it's very interesting how lawyers and legal firms, you know, are the only career, the only job in the whole of all the markets that actually have a clock, and they literally, for every call, every letter, every you know, every email, you know, I don't know any other career that has that set up.
Yeah, time
And
is
I
money
just
for
find
them,
that
isn't it?
yeah, well, and it's funny how, you know, time really, if we're really truthful and honest, is the only thing of value in this world.
Yeah. And guess what? You can bill for it just the same as anyone else can. And your
Yes.
time is valuable just as much as anyone else's is.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide. What have we got? The problems. Okay, well, Ian, I think you started to touch on this, you know, the problems. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, I know I've kind of said a few things already which give away this slide, but it really is a business, guys. Kevin's experienced it. I've experienced it. If you added together what we both spent on lawyers, you'd be horrified. Did either of us get justice? No. Even when I did my own cases in the courts, I still didn't get justice because it didn't suit the courts to give me justice. So it is a business. The courts and lawyers always win. It's been constructed that way deliberately. There's nothing coincidental about it. The lawyers, you know, effectively are more worried about upsetting the judge than they are about upsetting their client. I experienced that. Maybe Kevin did too. Now, the big next thing is, if you want to go into the legal system, and as I did, and try and untangle their web of textbooks and practice protocols and all manner of complexities, most people would give up, because it just is too, it's like walking into a swamp full of details that, you know, you're going to sink in the detail. Most people would. Now, I'm very tenacious, and I didn't. I'm not saying I'm an expert on practice protocols or the legal system, but I had to read huge amount of stuff just to be able to represent myself in high courts. I did 4 hearings on my own against top barristers and QCs on the other side, and I had to know as much as I possibly could in order to be able to pull that off. And I still didn't get justice, even though I had all of that study, if you like. It is very adversarial. When I had lawyers before I ran out of money, it's like throwing missiles at each other. Or, you know, it really is. It gets very aggressive. There's some nasty things that get said in letters and allegations, and when you strip all that stuff back, the actual substance of what's trying to be established is kind of lost in the argument. It's all by design. It's very much designed to whip up emotion. More emotion, the more you want to win, the more you're prepared to spend, because, you know, it becomes a battle, a war of attrition, you know, and you can't lose, because the deeper you get into it, the more you have to win, because you've already invested so much in the costs that you can't bear the thought of the other side winning and losing all your money. Little do you know that the end of the journey that you think is just around the corner, that corner keeps on stretching away from you. And that's all by design as well. So you have these practice protocols. I think lawyers must spend most of their study actually working out what they mean, because they're so complicated and totally unnecessary in my opinion. You can get to the heart of the matter much quicker without all this bullshit that the courts and lawyers want you to go through. So as Andy said on the earlier slide, justice really isn't about merits. It's not really about who's right and who's wrong. It's more about who's more skillful at the legal system, who's the better player. Bit like a game of poker. If you're good at poker, you might win. It's a bit like that. Whoever plays the hands the best is probably going to win the game. It's not. And where's justice gone? It's not there. It's disappeared right at the early stage. Now the other thing that I learned, and Kevin has also experienced this, is if you're involved in something which is going to shake the system up a bit and expose the agenda of the system, as my matter would have done if I'd ever got justice in the legal system, and I'm sure Kevin's would have done as well. They're going to rig it. It doesn't matter what you do and how you do it. You can have armies of QCs and lawyers. It doesn't matter how much you spend. The judges are going to take the view that whatever you're revealing, if that's going to shake things up and challenge the status quo, they're going to rig it. They're just going to hand down a judgment that doesn't suit the truth, or they're going to try and do a private deal outside of any public judgment or decision, because they simply don't want to upset the status quo. And that sadly is, for many people, the reason why they're wasting their time going to lawyers, going to barristers and QCs, if their matter is going to challenge the system. You guys, you are wasting your time. I'm living proof of it, and so is Kevin.
So are many other people, I'm sure. We've actually had comments through from some of the audience tonight who have gone through similar or an experience where it's left them destitute. It's left them with nothing at the end of it. There are lots of people out there, and it is all to do with unjust enrichment and corruption, I'm afraid. But that's why we're here. That's why we're bringing this to the table. And you know what, guys, this isn't, Andy will tell you, this isn't new information that we're bringing to the foreground. Yes, it's research, well researched. We've done our due diligence. Andy's been practicing, and everyone has experience in these areas, and we're packaging it together and we're bringing it together to make it easy for others to access it. But it's not new information, right?
Now, what we've done, I mean, we'll perhaps cover it later on, is what we've done is we've made it accessible and we've made it easy by facilitating it with a shepherd to guide you through a process. And that's what was missing. What we're explaining tonight is not new information at all. It's been around for a long time. What hasn't been available is the ability to facilitate it, and that's what we've done at Natural Justice.
Okay. Now, just one question before we go on. There are some people on here who have already, they're either caught up in an existing process right now, whether it's in the legal realm or whether it's in the lawful realm. One of the questions is, can you use this process even if you're partway through an existing process? I.e., can you put down the process that you're currently using and use private law?
So
That's probably one for Andy.
Yeah, I think I missed my cue earlier. I was on mute, so but Ian picked it up very well. So thanks, Ian. Yes. So you should never go anywhere near a court until you've established all the facts and all the law and agreed it between the parties. You shouldn't be anywhere near a court. But you have not found out this information till now. So you find out this information now. You're already in court. You're kind of mid-battle or whatever, or skirmish. So often you have little side battles along the way of the main war, as it were, in the adversarial world. Well, it's never too late to try and implement these things. They can always bring you better outcomes. Sometimes it is harder to work when you're on the back foot and get these things implemented properly. It's always better to do them in a timely manner up front, but they're never going to do you any harm, and they can only improve your situation in almost every case. So yeah, there's always a benefit. I know an example of someone who he didn't agree the facts and the law before he went to court, had a bona fide claim against a rather large bank, and went off a little bit half-cocked and tried to broadside him with a set of kind of applications that he had to defend. But then he corrected himself, brought in his private administrative process to establish the facts, managed to survive through this kind of side battle, and came out the other side with the tables turned completely, and people coming to him with settlement offers. So yes, you can pick these things up mid a certain process that you're already involved in. However, we can't say one size fits all. It depends on your circumstances. Every people's case is different. So, but yes, the short answer.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we will move on to the next slide, and we've got to keep our flow going. And so we move to the solution. Now we've covered a lot about, you know, the problems, the things that you're going to come up against, the differences between the different jurisdictions and why we would use this. But, you know, let's talk about the merits of private law process and what that actually means. Ian, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, you know, it's a bold statement, 100% track record. I challenge anyone to walk into a lawyer's office and ask them, what's your track record like? And I think you'll probably find they wouldn't like to answer the question because they can't all be winners in their system, because as we've already established, it's kind of a 50-50 game. But in private law, if you are in the truth and you are prepared to swear an oath that you're telling the truth, you will get 100% success. Now, whether the other side can afford to pay you is a different matter. But if you can establish the truth with yourself and swear an oath and then agree with the parties, the outcome is certain. And that's the massive difference between private law and the legal system. The process is very simple. We'll come to it in a few more slides. None of this bullshit that the lawyers want you to go through. It cuts straight to the matter, to the heart of the matter. And I think anybody who's been through a legal process will know what the bullshit is I'm talking about. You as the damaged party are in charge. Go back to what we said very early on. You know, you have inalienable rights. You're not little me with no power. You are a living being. You are as powerful as anybody else on the planet. You don't need to look up to a judge to establish whether you should be or shouldn't be given justice. You can establish it yourself. So you are in charge. The truth is your judge. If you're in truth, you will win and get 100% success rate on your case. You know, the solution doesn't need, as Andy said, it doesn't need someone else. You don't need an arbiter. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need courts to establish what is right and wrong. If you're right and you can swear an oath, why do you need other people to establish that? You already know it. So all you're doing now is exerting it, and it's, you know, and getting your own remedy, as you know, as you should be able to, with your inalienable rights, rising above, as Andy says, ace high in the pack. You're not ace low. You've got to change the mindset, as I have to. As Kevin has, as many others have. You're not this little me who's got no power, who has to go to the big powerful law firm and the, you know, at the mercy of the judge who sits up high and looks down at you when you're in the courtroom. What a load of bullshit that is. Why not do it yourself and let us help you do it by facilitating it? It's quicker, it's lower cost. And if you're looking at stress, guys, if you want to go through fighting the establishment in the High Court, that's pretty stressful. You can avoid all of that by private law.
Also, you know, you said earlier it's not adversarial, it's more of a peaceful process, like you say, stress-free. But what that also means is you're not attacking public in the public. You're attacking it from the private, which, you know, in their realm, it's it's like the line of least resistance for us, right? Because if you're attacking them in the public, they're going to come at you big time in the public, because they cannot be shown to be, especially gatekeepers, all these, FCAs and the ICOs and all these so-called independent bodies and regulators, etc. They don't want to be attacked in the public, because if they're attacked in the public, it reduces public what's the word I'm looking for?
It reveals them to be actually complicit in the agenda, and
yes.
they don't. So they will fight back. And you're absolutely right. If your case is going to expose them for who they really are, then of course they're going to make your life difficult, because they don't want the masses to know that the system is rigged. That's just the reality of it. So doing it in the private, which is what private law does, not only does it expose them, the people who run these organizations with their unlimited liability, but it helps them to settle and remedy the matter without having to expose the darkness that they play with every day of their lives, because that's who they are. So you can't win in the public, but you can win in the private.
Brilliant. Now, a lot of people have been asking around cost. Ian, what would the cost be to somebody if they were to do this alone on their own? We have generally gone over it, but there's still a lot of questions about how, what the cost is.
I think the best thing is to let's talk about our pilot scheme and what we're prepared to offer on the pilot scheme, and then as we see going into 2022, there'll be much more information about our other solutions that we're going to be providing. But I think it's probably best. I'm not trying to evade the question, but we do have some commentary a bit later on about the pilot scheme. I don't really want to answer questions about everybody's individual case, because it's impossible to do that. But we can certainly answer the question relating to the pilot scheme, and we will do in a few slides, I think.
I think that would be great, because then we can give a real life kind of example to people so they can see it for themselves. So on that note, are you happy to move next slide? Great. So the private law process itself. Now, Andy, you're our technical expert. You've been working on this for quite some time. Do you want to explain this slide and beyond?
Yes, so very simple process, really. You establish the facts, you swear them under oath. Those facts must pertain to two things: the substance of the wrongs done as they relate to the maxims of law, the fundamental principles of what's right and wrong and what you can and can't do, and what is the quantum of the damages. How do we put a quantity on? So it's quality and quantity, really, you're trying to establish with the facts. So you put those in an affidavit and you go to the other side. Here's the truth. What have you got to say about it? And if you've told the truth, they won't be able to tell you that you're assert facts to the contrary without committing a crime. So they generally don't. And so we follow an administrative due process where we say, you sure you're not going to reply? And when they go quiet the third time, you have that's what's called due process. They've been given an opportunity to respond, they didn't respond, and we tell them, look, if you don't respond, then by your silence you'll hang yourself, essentially. And that creates the agreement of the parties. It's by tacit acquiescence usually. So once you've got the agreement of the parties and you've followed due process, so you've been fair, you've given the other side an opportunity, you've then got to bring the remedy. You're not asking someone else to, oh, please solve my problem. You're saying, here's how you will solve this problem. You can solve it by paying me X, all right? And X has to be a reasonable calculation. And there's ways that you need to figure that out. As we said earlier, it could be you need to do X instead of, so what you need to do could be pay money, or what you need to do would be fix that, put that right. Repair the, it depends what the damage does is, or what sort of claim you're talking about. But usually, we're talking about some sort of compensation. So you say, here's what I need to put it right, and it's now a substantial bill, a true bill, essentially, for damages, harm, whatever it is, compensation. A bill, when it's unpaid, turns into a security. All right, so there's a process called securitization, whereby a bill unpaid becomes a defaulted bill. It's what it's called is a liquidated dishonor is the best way to put it. When someone hasn't paid a bill, that's now a claim against them for a certain amount of money. But guess what? You can trade that. It's an asset. It's a financial asset. So you have this securitization process, and then you want some way to actually liquidate that. Banks used to be called discounting houses. Why? Because they used to buy people's debts from each other at a discount, then go and claim the full amount. So that's one way that the monetization of a security can be done. The way that we perceive, and this doesn't mean it's the only way, there are a couple of other ways, but one of the main ways that we perceive this being done is by asset-backed securities issuance. So that would be like, again, the tool is neutral. We're familiar with asset-backed securities maybe in a negative connotation from 2008 and what the banks were all up to with their bundles of mortgage securities, of subprime mortgage securities, and selling them between each other. But essentially, you can do it in a perfectly good way. You can put a bunch of actual substantial value securities together, and they can be the bonds can be issued against them. People can invest in them, and essentially, you can liquidate them in that way. So those last 2 points are really an entire presentation in themselves. So we can't go too much into it, but those of you who are a bit more familiar with the world of finance and high finance, you might understand some of what we're talking about there. But yeah, you step into the world of banking. You become a private banker essentially, because anyone who does banking business is a banker, and we all do banking business, so we're all private bankers. We just don't know that we have these private banking skills that we can use. Now, again, what happens with natural justice, like anything else, is we educate and we facilitate these things to be done. We have people working on our team who are very, very knowledgeable in these realms. I have a bit of experience in them. Ian has a lot of experience in them. Kevin has moved in these circles. We have a couple of other people as well. And together, our kind of pooled knowledge in them means that, there's many different ways that you can design vehicles and vessels to kind of make these things liquid. So that's the kind of end stage for the process that you're aiming at. So is there anything people want to add here or ask questions or anything?
Well, actually, yes. How long would you envisage this process to take?
Yeah, well, it depends probably on the complexity of the case, because that's before you even get to stage one. Yeah, it's like, if it's a complex case, that may take a long time. With, if I take Kevin as an example, we had to do some things before we even got to establishing the facts, which would just kind of, save him from a couple of things that were about to eat him, as it were. So a couple of commercial monsters coming after him before we could even get the time and space to think about, well, what are the facts and what's your story and what matters and what doesn't. And that was a long and laborious process. But obviously, if you think of the heights from which Kevin fell, it's all relative scale. So he fell from a great height, and therefore it was a very complicated process. So it took some time to establish the facts first, and establish the wrongs and the damages. However, once you get to that point, that you get that fundamental document that's right, everything's built on the truth. So you spend them. It's the most important to spend your time getting the truth absolutely right, because if you don't get it right, then you're building a house of cards, or you're building a house on sand. You want to build your house on rock, okay? Your administrative house, as it were. So the agreement of the parties by due process is fairly straightforward. It might take a couple of months. Again, you might change the length of time it took depending on the quantum of the process, depending on who's involved, depending on the urgency of it. There's various factors. Could take a couple of months, could take a couple of weeks, but it has to be kind of, you've got a bit of liberty there, and again, like you said earlier, Simone, it's really important that you're being as fair as the justice you're expecting back in return. So that plays some part in the amount of time offered, depending on what's going on, or at least what we suggest should be offered. The bills for damages, again, there is a due process element to them as well, so that can be between a couple of weeks and a couple of months. That might take a bit of time in terms of establishing or clarifying various elements of the quantum, but that should have all been done up front before you really start. So yeah, so it's the same sort of time as 2 and 3, could be anywhere between 2 weeks, 2 months, something like that each. Securitization is generally 90 days. Running from the end of the billing process, all right, as a good indication. That's about 3 months. And then the monetization process, well, that should hopefully all be in place and shouldn't take too long to do. But I'll probably leave Ian to comment on that since he's more knowledgeable about that side of things than I am.
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple of things. Thanks, Andy. The process can be accelerated if there are circumstances that warrant it. You know, you're in charge of the process, and there are steps of the process which you can speed up if you need to do so. It all depends on the circumstances. But remember, whatever you do in this private law process, I can guarantee it's going to be faster than the legal system, because that by design is long drawn out. The other thing I'd like to add is that the whole subject of securitization and asset-backed securities will be covered by us in a separate webinar in due course. We can't really go into detail tonight, but we know what we're doing with it. I've got 38 years of experience in working in financial services at a high level. We've got Terry Franks, who's worked at the highest levels of banks. We've got other people in our organization that understand what these things are and how they work. We will be creating our own market in asset-backed securities. I'm not going to explain how all that works, but rest assured, we do know what we're doing, and we do know what the exit is here and how to execute it for those who come into this process. As I say, we could go on about the asset-backed securities. It really is a whole presentation in its own right. So I don't want to go any further than that at this stage. Andy, did you want to say something else?
No, not really. I think that's everything. But it really is a huge topic. There's so much to talk about. So no, we look forward to doing that. But I think it's probably going to need some diagrams and all sorts to explain. So yeah.
If I could just add that we wouldn't be bothering to put all this together and build all of our systems and processes and recruit all of our resources and staff if we didn't think that there was an exit.
Good. I think a lot of people will be pleased to hear that, because we are working. The solutions that you've been bringing online, they're getting now more traction. They're developing out. We're improving the platforms and the systems. But what we're delivering tonight is actually showing you the next solution that we're bringing online. This is what we're working on. This is what we're establishing, and it will be just as successful as all the other, mortgage free, which will run a securitization and monetization on that as well. So it's all, different parts of the business, but very similar in terms of what they're hoping to achieve. Okay, shall we move to the next slide?
Yep.
So Ian, why don't you tell us then, what is this? How are we going to get this off the ground? What do we need? What are we looking for? And where's this going to take us?
So I try and give the big picture here. I know, as I've probably explained with a bit too much passion earlier, that there's massive need out there in the world for proper remedy. But the problem is, for us right now, is we are growing very rapidly, and we need to recruit a number of people that can come and apply this process to enable remedy to be delivered to so many more people. And we're not just talking about the UK either. We have big plans. We want to bring this solution to most parts of the world going forward, along with all the other freedom solutions that we talk about on our roadmap to freedom. If you go to our website and go to the videos, roadmap to freedom, you'll see what we're talking about. I'm sure most of you already know. But like all things, it doesn't, Rome isn't built in a day. You have to start somewhere, And what we want to do with private law as a remedy in its own right is to start with this pilot scheme. And because we don't have enough practitioners recruited yet to do this on a mass scale, we need to limit how many clients we can work with, and we need to bring some revenue in order to give us the opportunity to recruit more people who will practice the private law process within our system. So it's kind of an evolution, step by step. We're not able just to go out there and launch this for 15,000 people in one go, because there is that much sort of demand for it. So the idea is that we start with filtering particular cases that may be in the audience tonight, or maybe people those who've come tonight, maybe it's people that you're going to refer. Minimum damages of £1 million is what we're looking for. It's difficult to be absolutely precise on what damages you've suffered, but as a ballpark, we're trying to filter the cases that we would be able to service starting at 1 million and over, just for our pilot scheme. In order to enable us to review the case, you can come to the Matrix Freedom platform. You have a login, and then you can click on Freedom Solutions and click on the Natural Justice logo. There's it'd be very obvious when you get to the Freedom Solutions page, and then once you've clicked on Natural Justice, it will give you the option of leaving your details in a pro forma, so you can explain to us in short form what happened and why you believe that you've been damaged. It become very self-evident when you come into the platform what we're talking about and how to do it. What we do need is a chronology. As Andy said about Kevin's case and my case, I mean, if you were just to write out everything that ever happened, you could be writing a book. We don't want a book. We just want the key events written in a chronology. Try and strip the emotion out and just give us the key facts by date order. And that's what we mean by a chronology. You have to be able to swear an oath that what you're saying is true, or you believe it to be true. This private law process is not for nefarious people to try and use it to make a profit. It's not about that. It's about being in truth, being in honor, and that if you're going to swear an oath, that you are risking perjury here if you're not telling the truth. So I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. You've got to know that you are righteous about your story. Now, of course, we can't do it all for free. So there is going to be a facilitation fee, and we're going to try and make that as easy as possible to fund, which I think is probably on the next slide.
Okay.
And here we are. So we looked at this, and there's many ways to do this, but we're going to trial this and see how it works. If you can estimate the amount of damages, or in the legal system they call it quantum, i.e. what you believe you've been damaged by, the amount that you've been damaged by. If you take 1% of that amount and cap it at £50,000, and that would be clearly cases of £5 million and over would be at the 50,000 level. And then if you can fund the fee in 3 stages, I should say. Let me correct myself. 4 stages with a further element of success fee at the very end of the process, which will be the asset-backed security stage, which actually comes out of the settlement. So you don't have to pay 25% up front. It comes out of the amount that you get in settlement. So effectively, you divide the fee into 4 stages, and you don't have to, if you go on the journey, you don't have to complete all 4 steps. So you can back out if you really needed to, and we try and come to an accommodation about that if there was some reason why you couldn't continue. But I think that compare this to the legal system, for those with large cases. 50,000 would be a retainer. That just gives you a coffee in their nice meeting rooms.
So I just want to be clear, this pilot scheme, we're running it for bespoke cases. And when we say bespoke cases, that means there's going to be an element of risk. They're going to be high net worth individuals, generally speaking, people that have lost a lot. They're going to be, bespoke, complex kind of cases. Now, what people must understand, they're hearing this for the first time, that we have a separate solution that we're bringing online for group claims as well. So that is pertaining to individuals who have all experienced the same wrongdoing from a party. So it could be government, it could be the vaccine industry, etc. And there's going to be multiple claims for the same thing. That's called group claims. That is something we're bringing on later. What we're talking about is bespoke, complex cases like Kevin's, which we heard earlier, where it's one party against another, and it's complex, a lot of risk involved due to the amount that we're talking about, the amount that's been lost in damages. That might not be as attainable for a lot of people, or relative for a lot of our clients. So what would you say to that, Ian?
Well, this is just step one. On the journey of natural justice, we launched natural justice primarily to assist people with void mortgages, and it was always my intention to make private law available for a much wider audience. But like any organization, you can't go in and solve everyone's problems unless you've got the resources to do so. So we're doing a pilot scheme to help us build our team. Quite frankly, the demand for this is enormous, but you can't service everybody unless you've got the right team. You've got to build the team. The pilot scheme enables us to do that, and then we go into 2022, and hopefully by then we'll have the right team and we'll have the right level of resources, and we can widen this out to a much wider audience, because that's my intention. This isn't meant to be only for the elites. This remedy is for the people.
Don't think you should say that word.
What I mean is the elites, as in their wealth. That's what I mean. I don't mean the elites. So you can't do everything at once, guys. Let's be realistic about this. We've got an enormous amount of clients already on our other remedies, and we're growing very quickly. This is a way for us to showcase what we can do. We were able to recruit some fairly high-profile individuals whose cases would stand no chance of going anywhere in the legal system, and we'll make them happen, and that will put us on the map even further. Let's be honest, the legal system has been around a long time. It didn't start, it didn't just get off the ground in an instant. It took a while for it to build itself. We want to take the legal system on with this system of private law justice and remedy. We're not going to do it overnight. You have to build it gradually.
Yeah, so I think you've kind of answered many of our audience's questions tonight in reference to their own scenarios. Can this be done for their situation? When can we do this? Can the average person with no funds work a private method? How would it be achieved? And the answer to all those is yes. If you've got no funds, you could do this on your own. If you have got a small case, the same principles are applied. The problem that we've got is we need to establish track record, and we also need to establish a team that can deliver that on behalf of our clients if you want to put your case forward. So that is why we've put some boundaries around it at the moment, right? So
let's be clear, we have a team already. We just don't have a big enough team to take on the huge number of cases that are going to be sent to us. So it's not like we don't have a team. We have a team, but they're very busy on the mortgage remedy. We need to expand our team, and we have many people who want to join us, on the practitioner side. But we're an organisation. Unfortunately, we have to work in commerce as well. We can't take lots of people on and pay them all unless we've got clients. So we have to bring those two things together simultaneously, and that's what the pilot scheme will assist us to do next year. That we'll blow the doors off it, because there's so much demand for it.
Yeah.
And also, this will help, running a pilot scheme will help us to ratify and verify the process, see where we need to streamline things and make things more efficient. So when we do launch fully, that we're going to be ready for our clients. We're going to give them the best service, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I might be able to comment on that a little bit because, particularly, the practitioners that we're looking for, as we found, it's like if you come from a traditional legally trained background, you're having to, again, as Ian said earlier, you're heavily invested in a certain way of thinking. You spend a lot of money on the education. It's quite painful to, uncomfortable, maybe is a better word, to change the way that you look at the entire what you've given your life to. And so we found recruiting from those pools can actually be hard work because you're not starting with blank slates. So you need people who've already kind of got this paradigm change. They've got their good basic skills to kind of think logically, to be able to extract what matters out of the people's, epic sagas and condense it down, distill it down into a pure story, which is actually quite a difficult thing to do. It's much more difficult than people think. But by using the pilot scheme, we'll be able to kind of get people trained up so that then, when we cast the net wider, as Ian said, as soon as we can, really, but next year it looks like, as soon as possible, then those people are going to be sharp and they're going to have sharpened themselves on the stones of the more complex and difficult cases, and then we're going to really be able to handle the kind of more volume, slightly smaller cases, hopefully, that people to help with the more average person. So yeah.
Can I also
Brilliant.
add that as we do with all of our freedom solutions, we try and use commerce against commerce. So if a client or a prospect for this pilot scheme has the ability to take an unsecured loan or a credit card to pay these installments, then of course we will offer them the sovereign reserve service, which is the settlement of those credit liabilities. So in effect, if you are able to finance the these 4 stages, via some other credit institution or so-called credit institution, we'll settle those so-called credit liabilities with our sovereign reserve process. So effectively, you can get private law remedy for free if you're able to access credit.
Also, I'll add to that as well, Ian, that very soon we are bringing on another solution to this, which is the bank securities. You're reclaiming your bank transactions. That's going to free up a lot of people, right? That's going to give a lot of people resources back into their hands that will enable them to access the natural justice team to help with their individual cases. So if you're listening to this, I would say wait for the bank reclaims, which are coming in very, very soon. And that is just a standard process that will be, it's not controversy. This is track record. It's being done. It's pretty straightforward process, and that will be able to fund going forwards if sovereign reserve isn't applicable to you, and you're thinking, how are you going to do that? Well, we're always bringing on new solutions that will be enabler for those people.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing, Simone. It's just like once you understand the tools at your disposal in commerce, you understand that for every situation, for every right, there's a remedy, as it were. For every situation that you might be in, there is a way to make something happen. It might not be right away because obviously we've got to get certain things in place. That takes a bit of time, as is explained. But eventually we'll get to people and we'll be able to, if you can't make something work, we can often figure out a custom way to make something work for you. So,
and unlike the public realm, equity knows no time. So anybody hearing who's gone through a tragic scenario, a situation, just know that equity, there is no limitations here. You can go back as far back as when the first fraud or the first damage or the first harm happened to you, and there's no limitations in equity. So please don't fear. Your case, can and will be dealt with at any point.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, we haven't said it so far, that in the legal system, I mean, I think Kevin mentioned it earlier, that you're often time barred. Now, you know, if you go in and have a look at these, they're called statutes of limitations. Now, you know, that to me is like, what a load of bullshit that is. If you've been wronged and you've been genuinely damaged, why should there be a limit on what you can do to remedy it? You know, the only reason there are statutes of limitations is so that you have to accelerate your sort of focus and try and finance your lawyers, because if you don't, you're going to lose the opportunity. It's like buy now while stocks last. It's totally ridiculous.
It's to light a fire under you, so you burn up quicker.
Private law, you know, the truth doesn't die out. The truth is the truth. And if you've been wrong, you've been wronged. There's no limit of time on it. You either have been wronged or you haven't. You know, when I saw these statutes of limitations, when I started studying the legal system, I thought, what the hell is this about?
Great. Well, we've had lots of wonderful comments so far. People are very excited. They're positive. They're seeing the future of this and how this is a real meaningful, a real tangible way to get remedy. And you know, this really is going to be forming part of our private society going forward. This is what we are going to be operating on. This is going to be our own justice system, our own natural justice system. And so, you know, we you know, even though it is information that's already out there, this is what we will go by. This is what we will live by. This is what we will walk out. And I think that's a really important point for people to know as well, that if you're coming into the Matrix Freedom family and you're looking at our solutions and you're, you know, wondering where is this all heading to, you know, part of the reason why we're using commerce against commerce is to resource ourselves up so that we can buy land, so that we can put funds into research and development, into the free energy, clean medicines, and be able to live in a private society which is functioning under the rules of equity, under what is right, what is true, what is fair, what is just, going back to the simple principles that Andy, you know, was drawing us back to at the very beginning of our discussion. So yeah, so guys, it is exciting. I love the comments, and so many people have you know, been thanking and sending their love to just hear this is hope to a lot of people, Ian. So do we want to move on to the next slide? Do we have? Okay, Ian, would you like to give us an explanation?
Yeah, we sort of touched on this a little earlier. I mean, we've got a lot of compassion. I had some pretty dark moments in my little story. And I know if you're really in a jam and you can't join the pilot scheme because maybe you can't get credit, or maybe there's some other reason, you know, don't think we're going to ignore you. We want to try and help, but we do need to know your situation, and we have to take a view on it. And if we can help you, we will. If we can't help you, hopefully we can give you some guidance that might be able to, you know, push you in the right direction. It's not that we don't want to help people, it's just that we don't have the bandwidth to help everybody. But really special cases, I'm sure we will do our absolute utmost to try and help if we can. So please submit your matter, even if it's not at the £1 million level, because there might be something else we can do for you.
Yeah, and it might be that we could find a way for you to kind of hold your fort, as it were, for enough time for us to be able to then be in a position where we can then help you. So further down the road, so play for time, as it were, until we're ready to be able to help you with something. That might just be a case for some people.
I mean, basically, we're in it together, guys, and you know, we wanted to help each other, and that's what the whole Matrix Freedom community is all about. But we just have to be realistic. You know, we can't help everybody, but we've got a lot of knowledge, and if we can, we will. So that's pretty much all I can say on this slide, I think.
Great, thank you. Okay. I think this is an important one for many people.
So I don't know if there are any lawyers on tonight. I'd like to think that what we've been talking about may resonate with some of them. as to why they're actually lawyers. But anyways, that's another subject for another day. I'd like to just tell you my little story. When I first walked into a big swanky lawyer's office on my problems I was experiencing, I had no idea how much I was actually going to spend over the course of time. I think if I'd known from the beginning, I probably never would have started. But at no time did any lawyer, and I did work with quite a few big firms, quite well-known big names in the city. At no time did anybody from those law firms ever say to me, well, of course, Ian, if we don't achieve any success for you, you get your money back. Now, if you buy if you buy a washing machine and it blows up, do you get your money back? I think you do. If you buy anything and it doesn't perform, you probably are entitled to your money back, but not in the legal system. But in our system of private law remedy, if we can't achieve what you need, and that's in this instance on our pilot scheme, the asset-backed security, the creation of an asset-backed security based on your case, we will give you 100% of your payments that you made to us back to you.
This is a very similar ethos to the mortgage free, right? I know that it's separate from what we're talking about tonight, but you know, it's a very fair way. If our clients are not happy, if there are things that haven't, and we've not performed well, you know, we look at that very seriously. You know, this is about equity, right? And we've got to work on those principles.
Well, you know, the reality is that, you know, the confidence we have in the private law process is so high. I mean, I'm not stupid. You know, I haven't built lots of businesses in my 38 years and done crazy things, because I wouldn't be still doing businesses if I was like that. So, you know, I'm not expecting anybody's ever going to ask for a refund, to be quite candid on this. But the offer's there. If we don't perform, we pay your money back.
Okay. There are a couple of questions on the securitization. Somebody's asked, apologies, I've lost it now. These very small space here. Oh, if a bill isn't paid and it's securitized, is it securitized at a discount or its face value? And I know that's going back a few slides.
Again, we're going to do a webinar on the detail of this, but high level, when you trade anything, someone's going to buy your security. You don't get 100%. There has to be a market, and there's always a difference between the bid and the ask. So someone's buying something from you, they're going to sell it on, and you can't expect them to pay you 100% because there's no margin for them to sell it. So that's a very high level answer. I'd much rather go into detail on our next webinar.
I think that's good. Okay, we will leave it for the next webinar. So if you do have questions regarding the monetization, securitization aspect, please keep your eyes peeled for an invitation. Next slide. Okay, Andy, would you like to take this one up? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got two mutes, one on their phones, one on the software. So yeah,
we did say you're a technical expert.
Yeah, except when it comes to muting myself in the middle of a presentation. But yeah, so this was actually touched on the last slides, which was basically we try and operate under all the principles that we're talking about, that all of this process is based upon, are the principles that we try and operate on within the business. And we've had a few, you know, I won't go into them, but we've had a few examples recently of these principles playing out within our own experience within the business, and how they're just principles which, once you see them in action in life, you have complete faith in them, because you just understand that they're woven into the fabric of reality. which is why we have such confidence in everything we do. We always establish the truth. We're always building on reality, on truth. We're always acting in honor. We're not going with spite or revenge or malice or anything like that. We're always bringing a positive energy. And I know a lot of you out there will probably understand, the importance of positive energy in life, that it can change. It can have dramatic impacts on you and others and on just outcomes of things that you never would expect. So we always act in honor, which means we treat people in a certain way, and so we're always in peace. So even though when we use the phrase, we use commerce against commerce, any kind of adversarial phrasing we might use, we're never really adversarial. All we're doing is bringing harmony and balance to things. We're putting things back how they should be for the benefit of the people who are our customers, who we're helping, and for the benefit of those people who've done them wrong, for their own correction. It's for everyone's benefit. It's for the good of the universe. All right, and we're bringing remedies. We're not asking other people to go and sort our remedies out for us, or asking that our customers should be going and seeking other people to remedy their problems for them. That puts everyone into a kind of victims mentality. It's a kind of subordinate mentality where you're reliant on someone else. No, it's empowering, because you're the one bringing the solution to your own problem. Okay, and that, as I say, we apply this internally with our relationships with customers across the board and in our own lives. And then integrity, this is just a really important thing, that because if you're based on all those things and doing all those things, then you're going to have integrity. And that's got to be the core of our business, because it does rely on truth. And the core of our dealings, and why we're sure that we're going to be successful, because we're going to attract those sorts of people to us to work with us in all things, whether it's as customers and clients first, whether it's in agents and people who are introducing to us, whether it's people who are going to be more high-level interactions, people who are going to come and work for us eventually, even though they might start off in one capacity and move to another. People are going to open doors for us in the high-level world of business, and how we're going to fundamentally found what Simone referred to earlier as these kind of private society, which is, it doesn't necessarily mean you're all kind of commune together on one patch of land somewhere. It can be an intangible thing, where it's just connections, communications, collaborations, alliances, peacefully living in harmony with the world. That's essentially what it is. And by these principles of what all the products that we're going and services that we're going to assist people with are all based on these. And that's fundamentally why they're going to succeed, because they're good. And they've got good as their heart and their purpose. That's the whole point of them. So,
and good always prevails. We see that.
Yes.
Good will always prevail over evil. So if we stay in those resonance, we stay in those frequencies, we stay and hold close to these principles, we can't go wrong. We're only following what is the blueprint of heaven. Yeah. That's the way I see it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we can't go wrong. We're here to bring heaven to earth. That's what we're told. So
yeah, you frame it in, for our audience, I imagine, would have a wide variety of beliefs, etc. But you can frame it within whatever your worldview belief system is. I'm sure you'll be able to frame that understanding some way, and that you understand it. And that's the thing. It's like from whichever angle you look at it from. Which do you want to be acting from the good, what is right, what is just, what is true, and do you want to be operating with a group of other people who are all doing the same when we see so much darkness and evil in the world, particularly at this time in history, let's say, when there's some pretty dark things going on, so the more lights come together, the brighter the light, it's really the positive, the long view for all of these things is very bright.
And I just want to add, these principles, they're not just about they're not just privy to the natural justice team or what natural justice is doing. This is across the whole business. Our ethos is equity. Our core values are spiritual principles: love, peace, honor, mission-led, integrity, truth. It's not about business ambitions. How much profit can we make this year, and how much can we build in materialistic, physical kind of fashion. We're everything we do is based out of spiritual principles, out of who we were truly designed, the true design and intention of who we were supposed to be in this world. And that's the difference. We are an organization. We have to get resourced, we have to get tooled up, and we can only do that through the funding sources from sovereign reserve, using their own system against themselves, effectively giving it as a solution that you don't really have to dip into your own pocket for, essentially.
I think it's
Using
sorry to
sorry
interrupt you, Simone. I think it's kind of understanding resources as a means to an end rather than an end in themselves.
Yes,
That's the key distinction. So yeah.
absolutely. Do we have any more slides? Is there another slide?
I
Let's
think
just
we've
check.
got Q&A slides, so that opens the
Ah.
floor to our remarkable number of attendees, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks
so
for sticking with us.
I think we do have some, I think we had some questions that came in before the webinar, because obviously there's been a lot of interest. If you haven't realized that, they're in our Teams chat if you've got access to it. I'm not sure
I do
whether
indeed.
yeah,
I've
they're
been
in.
going through. Yes, I've been trying to pick some of these as we go along. I think for the vast majority of these questions have been answered. A lot of them are to do with their own individual situations, bailiffs, credit cards, debts, issues with marriages, there's a lot of questions relating to other solutions, so we won't answer those in here. All I would say to our audience is if there are questions you've put forward that are to do with mortgage funding, the mortgage free, funding the natural justice fees, or funding sovereign reserve, or anything to do with bounce back loans and council tax, taxes, they are separate to what we're talking about this evening. They are either going to be related to a mortgage-free product, a sovereign reserve product, or our solutions to do with tax, business tax, personal tax. Those are solutions in their own right, and information for that will be disseminated, will be announced at the appropriate time. This webinar this evening is just solely around bespoke natural justice cases, complex cases, how we're, the process we're going to be using, how we're going to get remedy and ultimately justice for our clients. So, having gone through the list, there's a lot that's already been answered already. But
I suppose the key thing to mention to buy you a bit of time to have a look through those questions that are coming in, Simone, is look, whether you think you qualify or you think you might qualify, it's about fill out the form. We can sift through what you think your claim is and what the value of it is. Maybe there's some value you've missed in it that we think we can create in it. Maybe you've missed something. So we've got a form on the website. Have we got a link to the form, and has everyone been linked to the form? I don't know whether that's the case, but if you submit that form, then our people can review it and see whether it's something that's for now or for later, or maybe we can't help you. But it's either way we can kind of let you know.
Yeah, I just want to dwell on this a bit further. There are questions that have come in prior to the webinar. I've just pinged them to you on the WhatsApp, Simone. So
yes, I've been through them, Ian. I was just saying a lot of them are all to do with being wrongfully in prison, their own matters, yeah, their family members denied treatment in NHS. These are things that are individual to the yes, we will get to them as an organization, but for now we need this pilot scheme so that we can.
The questions I'm referring to, if you have your phone, you can see them on WhatsApp. They've come in prior to the webinar.
Is this the one where the one which starts? Do lawyers and barristers know about private law, and if so, why don't they practice it?
Yeah, those are the questions that came in prior to the webinar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Shall I field them since I have access to them?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
So see, these some of the questions, as Ian said, that came in prior to the webinar. So the first one, which you just heard: do lawyers and barristers know about private law? If so, why don't they practice it? Well, because it's they can charge lots of money for it, essentially, because the power is in the people, not in the representative. And the whole point of charging money is that you make something exclusive, you make it so that people can't do it themselves. Do they know about it? Well, it depends on what level they practice, you know. A lot of solicitors, they'll know some of it, but they haven't seen it for what it is because they haven't got the right angle or perspective on it. So they'll know a lot of the information, but they've just not looked at it from the same angle as it's amazing how much you can tell people and they still can't see what's right in front of them. You know, if you frame it correctly, when you've been through a legal education, you've had everything very well framed for you, okay, as to how to think about things. And very much you're coming from like these more complex realms, and you think all of this complexity can't be undermined or simplified. Essentially, it has to be complex. So the reasons why they don't practice it, yeah, commercial reasons. Do they know about it? Some barristers, the more commercial barristers, even more so in some ways, they understand the principles and they're almost completely on the same page as you, except for they just can't get past like this just slight, you know, because they've invested so much time and everything that they believe in their own myth, as it were, in the mythos and this world that they live in. You know, it's an edifice which they can't really challenge because their whole livelihood and way of living and existence would be challenged at the same time. So generally, they don't like to do it. So that's my experience of that one.
Yeah, I'd just like to add something.
Yeah, sure. If you want to, yeah.
Andy, in my experience, the knowledge is like a pyramid. There's people at the very top who've got most, if not all, the knowledge, and as you go down the pyramid, knowledge gets less and less.
Yeah.
And the lawyers, as much as they may believe that they're near the top, they're not really. Some of them may think that they're as knowledgeable as the High Court judges and the Supreme Court judges and above that, but they probably aren't. And as you go to the higher parts of the knowledge pyramid, then what we've been talking about tonight is definitely understood and respected. And a good example of that, and I hope Kevin doesn't mind me explaining this very briefly, is the Norwich Farmer application that was made against Kevin earlier this year, which effectively was perverse. You have a situation where Kevin's got evidence of wrongdoing against him, can't get anywhere in the legal system, and the very people that perpetrated the wrongdoing against him try and gag him from using the evidence, the very evidence that could give him remedy. And we were able to use a private law process against a judge in that particular case, High Court judge. And so far, and I'm not expecting the situation to change, the private law remedy was extremely effective. Because the judge in question, he gets it. He understands what this is about.
Yes, those in the know will know. One of the questions was, do High Court judges know about private law? Absolutely, they do. And this is why we're not taught it. This is why they don't teach us anything about law in the schools or the different jurisdictions or, even our constitution, as much as, that is not, it doesn't come into play in what we're talking about. It just as simple as basic as that. Our constitution, we're not taught that for the very reason of keeping us ignorant, keeping us dumbed down, keeping us in this position of being able to of vulnerability, basically, so they can pick you off if they want to. So yes, High Court judges are very much aware of it, and a lot of them are in bed with each other. They are what we call gatekeepers. They are effectively, part of the government branch, so they've got invested interest, especially where there's wrongdoing at very high levels, like in Kevin's case, where there's even high profile people involved. I don't think we can give that information, but that is what we're dealing with, high profile individuals effectively at the top of this. And so yeah, they know it, and now they're busted. We found out what their game is.
When
We're
you
playing
make
them at it.
when you make them personally responsible for what they do, which is going to be a new experience for many of these individuals, it's very effective. As we said earlier, it's the Achilles heel.
Tell us, Ian, this is all to do with financial products. You're talking about asset-backed securities. Does Matrix Freedom need a license for that? Does it need a banking license? Does it need, regulation? How are you, making sure that that aspect or that part of the business is in truth, in honor, in equity?
Well, of course, the system, and for many years of my career, I've had a license to manage people's money for them. And before I woke up to how the world really works, I thought that was sort of a badge of honor. If you had a license, you were sort of a step ahead of other people who didn't have one, and you were able to operate without being prosecuted if you had a license. So in my naivety, I thought it was actually a good thing to have a license. I've subsequently changed my view of that completely in the opposite direction, because having a license is just really a control mechanism to stop you from doing things like we're talking about tonight. So do we want a license? Absolutely no, 100% no. Do we need a license? Well, if you're going to step into the world of advising people and operating like a law firm, then you probably do need a license. But we're not doing that. We're enabling and facilitating those who want remedy to get it. We're acting as their private secretary. We're not advising them on whether they should or shouldn't do something. We're giving them the tools to do it for themselves. Now, I challenge anybody to tell me that why would you need a license for that? Go and get a book from the library that tells you how to do something. Does the author of the book need a license? No, he just writes a book. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I could add there, our whole point is to educate and facilitate people to do their own things for themselves using their own power. You do not need a license to do what is lawful. You need a license fundamentally so the government can control you. And why? Because it's for insurance purposes, really. It's really because it's a license to protect people from acting irresponsibly. If you're acting honorably and willing to take responsibility for what you do, and you're doing lawful things, then no license is required. You don't need permission from anyone to do that.
Yes. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our session, guys. We've been going for about 2 hours now. I know that there's still, a lot of people on this call, but we
high
are.
energy people remaining there.
Yes, I'm looking at the questions coming in. There is there's more comments, so many lovely comments, just saying thank you. This is the future's bright. Thank you so much. Really enjoying this. So there's a lot of good positive feedback for what we've outlined today. I think we've gone into some high level detail about what we're hoping to achieve and how we're going to do that. We've gone into some detail about the private law process and why it is so powerful. Is there anything else that we may have missed off, guys? Or Kevin, is there anything that you think our audience should hear us talk about or answer for them?
No, I'm just very sorry that you couldn't see me tonight. And if there's anyone who's had a similar issue to me, I'd be quite happy to speak to them personally about my experience. So, sorry, I am here, I promise.
Well, we're sad that you couldn't join us face to face, Kevin, and I'm sure our audience are as well. But there's plenty more opportunities. We will be doing more webinars like this. You'll be invited on again because you are an ambassador for what we stand for. You are our track record part. You're not the only one, but you're again, this what we've presented tonight, the bespoke cases, is exactly what we've undergone with you. You know, we've looked at yours. It's very high level, it's very complex over multiple parties to the actual action itself. And I think that's important for people to see and recognize that it does work and it does make a difference, not just to you as an individual, but to the overall picture. It's going to really help the rest of us. So I'm glad that you will be able to join us, even if it was just in the capacity of audio this evening.
Okay, thanks, Simone.
You're welcome.
Can I add something, Simone? We haven't spoken about, we have, as many people are aware, we have a very large number of agents who refer prospects to us for our other solutions. This referring prospects for our pilot scheme is also fully available, and the same commercial reward for doing so applies. So if you're on tonight's webinar and you know somebody who's fits the profile that we talked about on our pilot scheme, you know, do make the referral, and we'll try and help them.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think that on that note, it's been an absolutely brilliant topic. I've really enjoyed it. I hope the rest of you have. I want to give a big thanks to Kevin, our guest this evening. Sad I can't see your face. And a big thanks to Ian and Andy for all their phenomenal information, their expertise, their passion, their compassion as well. And, you know, here's to our future, guys. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Thank you for being a part of the Matrix Freedom family. We hope that you'll get stuck in with more of our solutions and get connected into us more and more as we progress through this, and ultimately create our own private societies where we can live as free individuals with everything that we need.
Thank
On that
you,
note,
Simone,
good night,
for
everybody.
hosting today, and thank you everyone very much for being here with us tonight.
You're so welcome.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you and good night.
Okay, good
Bye,
night.
everybody.